Welcome to Church Matters, where we talk about how church matters in world matters. My name is Brian Gross. I'm the priest of Christ Episcopal Church in Cedar Rapids, partnering again with Charles Crawley, a member of Christ Church and a voice of, I would say, of reason, justice, and maybe even brilliance.
2 out of 3 is not bad.
Charles, you want to introduce the folks what we're going to talk about today?
Well, we're going to talk about climate change. We're really thrilled today to have Rob Hogg as our guest. Rob was a state senator, my state senator for many years here in Cedar Rapids. And Rob is really, I consider the unacknowledged or acknowledged now leader of the climate change movement in Iowa. Right now, he is working with the Iowa Faith and Climate Network. You know, I just consider Rob a hero in this area. And so it's an honor to have you here, Rob. Thank you for being here.
Thank you for the invitation.
Yeah. So, you know, we're right in the middle of the COP, Conference of the Parties 2025, Brazil. I think maybe today's the last day. So this is an important topic that's in the national news. So I guess the easiest thing to ask you is why is climate change so important to you? I mean, how did you get into this?
Well, Charles, Brian, thanks for having me on the show here today. 40 years ago, I was a student at the University of Iowa and got introduced to the subject. And that wasn't the first time I really got introduced to it. It was the first time I studied it. Mm-hmm. I did things like read newspapers and magazines when I was in high school. And it was not a hidden issue at the time. 1986, I took an Introduction to Global Studies class where it was one of the topics addressed along with other global environmental challenges like stratospheric ozone depletion, which you may recall President Reagan dealt with in the Montreal Protocol on ozone depleting gases. And then the first President Bush strengthened that. And it's the most effective international agreement ever on an environmental issue. And it effectively ended the threat of stratospheric ozone depletion. So, I was paying attention at the time. The only other things I'll add is I had an opportunity to work with a professor when I was in graduate school who was focused on energy policy and climate change, and really internalized it, and came to realize that this was an overriding challenge that people around the world had to deal with. So I got trained up on the issue and knew it pretty well and was active. 1990, 91, I was trying to get the University of Minnesota to stop burning coal at their heating plant. That's where I was in graduate school. And really have worked on the issue on and off since then.
Okay. I was just wondering how, this is a Faith Matters podcast.
Yeah.
And so Church Matters. How has your faith come into that? I know here at Christ Episcopal Church, where you are a member, you worked hard with the vestry to install solar panels here, which has made us kind of off the grid for a church. And so, obviously that's important to you, and you continue to be a faithful member here. And how does that influence the way you see climate change?
Yeah, well, that's not a new question for me either. Charles, you may not remember this. You may not have been a member of the church at the time. When I first moved to town in 1998, I did an adult forum on climate change, and gave the audience 10 commandments for the greenhouse century.
Could you give us a couple of those?
Well, one of them, the one I remember is, "Thou shalt not eat meat from farms where their manure sitteth in lagoons."
That's very specific.
Yeah, that was
Well,
one.
see, I think I would have stopped at "Thou shalt not eat meat," but that's a different subject.
Well, if you're worried about methane, you don't want the manure sitting in lagoons, right? And methane's one of the most powerful greenhouse gases. So anyway, on the question of the faith issue, 1993, I was aware of this. There was a National Religious Partnership for the Environment created, and I was aware of it. And by the way, I actually went regularly to church when I was in graduate school with my wife, Kate. We were regulars. But it was in the mid-'90s that we moved to South Minneapolis, started attending a church there, and the priest there knew I was concerned about the environment and had been very active. And she challenged me, have you thought about how your faith interacts with that? And I started working on it. My first insight was a couple years after that. You have these moments where you're not feeling good and you're visiting the in-laws. So what do? You lie in bed. You lie in bed and you read the Bible. That's what you do.
Really? That's what you do?
Yeah. When you're not feeling well and you're visiting the in-laws, you lie in bed and you read the Bible. So I'm going through Genesis, and I hit the story of Joseph in Egypt. And I just said, this is just like the climate change issue. You've got this Hebrew inmate who's able to read the Pharaoh's dreams, and the story. 7 good years will be followed by 7 bad years. You've had the 2 dreams. That means God's already decided it's happened. And so therefore, on that basis, the Pharaoh appoints Joseph in charge of the entire country. And Joseph imposes a 20% tax on all agricultural production to store up these huge reservoirs of grain so that Egypt is ready for the 7 bad years. And I said, man, if I'd been an Egyptian farmer at the time, I would have been skeptical. But God acted through Joseph so that people could take effective precautionary action for the coming drought. It saves the people of Israel when they come to Egypt as the first environmental or climate refugees. So I was engaged, I was reading, I was considering, I was thinking about it. And then there's just some really simple connections between faith and climate or the environment more generally, which is, number one, if you love God, probably should have some appreciation for God's creation, and which means you don't really want to damage it or destroy it. Mm-hmm. You actually want to take care of it. So that's one answer. And then I've heard in church and in the Bible that you're supposed to love your neighbor as yourself. And it's pretty hard to love your neighbor if you're doing things that are inflicting harm on your neighbor. And, starting in the late 90s is when we really started to see this ramp up of extreme climate disasters. And I saw that, happening. And of course, experienced here 2008 with the flood of 2008. And from that point on, it just all in.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So you had mentioned, if you were farming in Egypt, you'd be a bit skeptical about
yes.
all of that stuff. Growing up in a state, in Wyoming, where it's coal, gas, oil, and cattle. So we've kind of hit on all those today. But there's a lot of skepticism right there as far as this whole climate change. And then thinking about, you want to take care of God's earth and God's creation. I think most folks there would say they are using what God has given them to help fuel and take care of the rest of the world. How do you, with skepticism or a slant or an outlook like that, how do you even go about approaching folks like that with the idea of?
Well, okay. So there is this, when I started working on this issue in the 90s, there was a lot of debate. Is climate change happening? Scientifically, that debate is over, right? It is just over. But 25 years ago, there was still that debate going on. And when I'm initially working on this issue through the National Council of Churches in 1999, I want to think of some way to address that. And that's where a story like Joseph in Egypt kind of speaks to it. Because I think what you want to do is tell people, I think it's okay to be skeptical. My favorite New Testament story, Doubting Thomas, right? Skepticism is not a bad thing. In fact, I think it's a good thing. You see, and you're from Wyoming, but if you were from Missouri, you'd want people to show me, right? Right? So skepticism is not a bad thing, but it doesn't mean you can bury your head in the sand. You got to pay attention to what's happening, right? So keep an open mind, pay attention to those things. And then the other thing is that we have heard that story before. We just had in Iowa in November, we had a statement released by 180 scientists at our private colleges and our public universities about climate change is increasing homeowners' insurance costs and property insurance costs. These are the top experts in the state telling us that. In kind of my view of things, there's no reason why God couldn't be helping these people educate us, right? So I know there are people who are going to say, hey, I think it's going to threaten my livelihood. I understand that. We don't need to demonize people because they've had a livelihood that, during World War II, we needed all the energy production we could get, right? All the plane production we could get, but now we're in a different time. It's the 21st century. This is the challenge of our time. We've got to find a way to leave the fossil fuels in the ground and build a clean, renewable energy future.
Yeah. So
it's open-mindedness.
Yeah. So you talked about the 21st century. What is the biggest thing we face now? I mean, it seems so grand. There's so many things to focus on for climate. Is there
right?
One particular
and of course it's not just climate.
Yeah.
That's if you one of the things I've been challenging myself to do more currently now is, okay, well, if I'm concerned about water, what's the Bible say about it? If I'm concerned about land, what's the Bible say about it? And there are rich stories that speak to that. We thank God in baptism for the gift of water.
Oh yeah.
Over it, the Spirit moved.
Yeah.
Right. Every time we baptize somebody, we say that. And maybe, God created it. God said it was good from Genesis on. So, that's water and land. You can do all those things. Climate change, here are the things you're worried about. You're worried about changes in weather patterns, precipitation patterns, more extreme events, the ranges of plants, insects, and animals being affected, new disease vectors that previously haven't been in places. You're concerned about sea level rise. You're concerned about ocean acidification. And all these things are happening.
But what about politicians now? It seems like environment does not even make it into the top 5 of issues that people are concerned about. And so the politicians are really not addressing them right now. And
well, politicians follow the people, right? So what you need is, if you want to change that, you need to have more people speak up. And I think every congregation ought to be considering what it's doing about the environment, climate change. That there's educational work to be done. There's leadership work to be done. I went the pastor at I think it was Heartland Christian Church in Urbandale. They hosted a climate change event. Mm-hmm. I asked him why. He said, because when we were on a mission trip to Honduras, the people there asked us, "What are you doing about climate change?"
Wow.
And he felt like he needed to respond to that.
Yeah.
Right. And so, there are lots of things that people of faith can be doing to address climate change. It's an issue that's there, and we should be addressing it. Climate change, environmental sustainability, environmental stewardship, creation care, however you want to phrase it. It's something that every congregation should be doing.
Yeah. So think of a congregation. So it's such a big topic. Like most things in our world today, it seems so vast and so huge. How do we even make an impact, a drop in the bucket thing? But so if we looked at, there's individual responsibility, then there's maybe responsibility of a congregation. So what would a church, if somebody's out there listening, saying, what can my church do? What can my church specifically do? I know we've done solar power out here, but there's many more things we could do. So what are things?
Absolutely. There are all kinds of things you should do. We did do the solar power, and I think people who are listening to this will want to know, well, how did it work out? Well, we're 15 months or so into it. Our utility bills are down compared to where they were from 2022 to 2023. Our utilities bills have been down about $8,800. That's actual reductions. We were paying somewhere between $600 and $1,000 a month, and now we're paying about $130 a month.
So that helps us, but how does that help the world?
And it helps the environment because you're reducing pollution. But you're not just reducing pollution. you are helping provide reliable, affordable power that's not going to go away, right? If more people did solar power, you actually help keep prices down for everybody, because it is the cheapest and quickest way right now to meet energy demand. But solar power is part of it. Energy efficiency projects. There are so ways to conserve energy. In Iowa, most churches are heating their buildings with natural gas, or some places still fuel oil. Well, it's time to start replacing those out with air-to-air direct heat pumps that are run by electricity. I would just visit a church, Good Shepherd Lutheran up in Decorah, where they have no natural gas lines to the church anymore, no fuel oil on site, and they got rid of all of their gasoline burning yard equipment. And it's going to save them money long run. It's saving them money now. It's going to save them money long run. It's a good thing to do. Funny little anecdote. The professor I worked for was on a radio interview at Minnesota Public Radio about energy conservation in 1990. And he looked up at the light bulbs, which were at the time the energy inefficient incandescent light bulbs. And he said, if you changed your light bulbs to the energy efficient compact fluorescents, it's like every light bulb could be a new member of Minnesota Public Radio, because it saves so much money.
Mm-hmm. But how do you wean people off of their leaf blowers? It just seems that they're everywhere now, and they're loud, they pollute, but they're ubiquitous.
Okay, well, I don't personally use a leaf blower, Charles, so I don't want to argue with you, but I think the thing to do is to just invite people to consider. And by the way, I don't know. I mean, if you have an electric leaf blower that's powered by solar power, I'm not sure that's so bad. But if you got a gas powered, all the gas powered lawn equipment needs to be switched out to electric, because they tend to be very high polluting, which is bad for your own health too, right? You got the bad health issues, and the electric works better. But don't demonize people for doing what they do. Invite them to consider, right? People will change. And then, of course, the other thing is, this is the Iowa Faith and Climate Network board that I chair, and there is a role for faith organizations to be involved with advocacy at a public policy level. If you had good public policy that reflected the health and economic and environmental benefits of cleaner and better equipment, maybe people wouldn't get stuck buying the other stuff, right? And then there's a real affordability issue for things. We were in a position as a church to be able to buy solar panels. Not every church is in that position, and so we got to find ways to make things more affordable. I'd like to see, for example, the diocese make money available for any church that wants to add solar panels. Why would you do that? It's going to increase the value of the church, and it's going to save the church money on their utility bills. But a church might not have the seed money, might not have the expertise on how to navigate the system right now, on how to do it. But there's no reason why faith organizations can't make that work for people.
Okay. So let's talk about a book that you wrote in 2013.
Yeah.
It's called America's Climate Century, What Climate Change Means for America in the 21st Century and What Americans Can Do About It. So if you had the opportunity to revise that book, is there anything that you would change or anything that you would add to it?
Well, first of all, the answer to that in general is no, because it is the best book ever written on the subject. And it is in general available in libraries across Iowa if people want to check it out. And I think you can still order used copies on Amazon for probably about 69 cents.
Or other places for people who don't use Amazon.
I actually don't know. I'd check your library. But I got out, we ended up printing over 8,000 copies of that book. It was self-published, 120 pages long, short, accessible, patriotic, practical. I do have a nice 4-page section on faith and climate. And of course, the ever popular appendix responding to Doubting Thomas, which, addresses the common arguments you hear. Obviously, that was written in 2013, and things have changed in the 12 years. One is, I think it's been pretty apparent what climate change is doing in Iowa, across the country, around the world, is actually worse than I would have expected at the time in 2013. I mean, I was expecting bad stuff. Mm-hmm. I think the volume of repeat disasters that we're seeing with these extreme weather events and the wildfires, and the wildfire in Los Angeles, and the wildfire in Hawaii, and the wildfire in Paradise, California, and then the Hurricane Helene, and then that flooding in Texas on the 4th of July,
which they're having again now.
I saw that. And I mean, it's just, there's so many disasters, it's hard to keep track of them. And but some other things that have changed, just first of all, the science, even better now than it was then. One of the big breakthroughs has been attribution science, where scientists increasingly feel confident in saying singular events are being caused or substantially contributed to by the overheating of the planet and the buildup of climate pollution in the atmosphere. It's called attribution science. The science has shown that the impacts of climate change are accelerating. James Hansen was out about 2 years ago with statements on acceleration. The UN World Meteorological Organization called the 2011s to the 2020 time period the decade of acceleration. And then there's just been a huge, huge breakthrough in the solutions on climate change. We weren't driving electric vehicles 12 years ago, really. There were a few little, people would have a little vehicle that putted around with an 80-mile range, maybe something like Charles might have driven at the time. But today, one of the most popular, some of the most popular vehicles for sale in this country, and if you look globally, the electric vehicle industry is dominating in many places, and unfortunately, the United States is sort of letting that pass us by. Solar power, extraordinary reductions in costs on solar power. Used to be $5,000 to $10,000 per kilowatt installed, got down as low as about $2,000 per kilowatt. So that's a huge reduction in price. It's the basis of why a person like Tom Steyer writes a book entitled Better, Cheaper, Better, Faster. Something like that, right? I mean, it's just the technology is there. 90+% of the new electrical capacity added in the United States last year was wind, solar, or battery storage. And by the way, that wasn't just California, it was Texas. Are people in Texas adding wind, solar, and battery storage because they're such strong believers in climate change that they've decided that that we've just got to do this? It's such a sacrifice, but we've got to do it. No, they're doing it because it's cheaper, it's better, it's faster, and it's meeting their needs. And so that was not the case in 2013 and 2012 and 2013 when I was writing my book. It is the case today.
So really it comes around to, as most things do, how does it benefit, or is it a detriment to me financially? Financial incentives for things like this as prices come down, as things helps.
No, Brian, I'm somebody who believes that people can be inspired to do things for good and right and just reasons.
Yes.
Right? I believe that, but I also believe it helps if it's cheaper, quicker, and faster.
Sure.
Right? I remember when we were having the discussion inside our church about solar power, there were some people in our congregation who not sold by the environmental argument, but it was going to save us money.
Yeah.
Right. And so, you do what you need to do, but here's the thing. Here's the thing. So that's good news. That's a major step forward. Does it mean that climate change has gone away? No. And the science of climate change is unfortunately very clear that this is as bad or worse as the scientists have been warning us for a long period of time. And we've got to find a way to help safeguard people and property from the impacts that are happening, safeguard our natural areas, the places that we love.
Yeah.
And we need to do that.
Yeah.
James Hansen wrote that book about storms of our grandchildren, and
2009.
the storms are here.
Yep. Of course, he had grandchildren in 2009, so he thought they were already there, and but they are definitely not. They're here, and we got to act. Heartbreaking for us after we've gone through the flood of 2008. I think about everything I've done since then to try to get people to understand that you need to take action to prepare for extreme weather events and disasters. Heartbreaking to see all those kids die in Texas because somebody in Texas decided it wasn't worth the cost of preparing for possible flash flooding in the valley. That's just no-brainer stuff that should have been done. And I hope, tragically, now that's happened, I hope they do it. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. This is where people have to be alert and pay attention to what's happening in the world and take action to protect ourselves and safeguard our future. And by the way, love God and the natural world and love our neighbors. And who is our neighbor? It's not necessarily the person across the street. It's the person around the world. And so when I see a deadly typhoon in the Philippines, I react to that. I react to that.
It's great to hear you say, to bring us to the end here with love God, love your neighbor. How does what we're talking about today affect that? What taking care of our earth helps take care of those that are also co-living in this world with us. And I've enjoyed hearing about your faith story through all of this. And I think I've learned more about you as a guy, Rob, with the faith that's led you to this.
Yeah, Rob, thank you for what you do, and thank you for who you are.
Well, you're welcome. Thanks again for having me on the show.
Yeah. I also want to thank Chris Hubbs for being behind the microphones and getting all the tech work done. And appreciate everybody out there listening. And in 2018, he was featured in the National Geographic documentary From Paris to Pittsburgh. Was that a film cameo? Were you on?
Well, so here's the deal on that. I get this odd call from somebody out of the blue. I'm in the state Senate, 2018. I'm up for re-election. I get this strange call that these people are putting a film together and they want to talk to me, and I don't get any other details really. So we were visiting some relatives that weekend, and they wanted to meet me on a Sunday night down at the DoubleTree Hotel. So yeah, I'm a little skeptical.
Yeah.
But I put on a nice shirt in case they're going to film and go down there. They ended up interviewing me for about 2 hours, and they asked for suggestions about other people who I could talk to or they could talk to. And I made some suggestions. I said, if you go up on the Shell Rock River and you can maybe find somebody who has flooded in 2008 and again in 2016, and you want to go to Iowa Lakes Community College and learn about their wind training program. And then the movie comes out, and we were the middle third of the movie. So Paris to Pittsburgh, when the president in 2017 pulled the United States out of the Paris Agreement, he said, I'm pulling us out of the Paris Agreement because I represent the people of Pittsburgh, not Paris. And the mayor of Pittsburgh, Bill Peduto, says, Pittsburgh? You have got to be kidding. We're still in it. We're still in the Paris Agreement. Yeah. And that then prompted cities and states and counties across the country to say, we're still in it. And there was an organization formed, America's All In. And the movie features Orlando, Florida, Iowa, Los Angeles, California. And we're the middle third. And it's a thing of beauty. It's a really well done movie.
Nice. From Paris to Pittsburgh.
Yeah.